Hey, my name is Phil. I work for Milligan College, and I want to welcome you to video devotion number 7 of X-Ray Vision, where we're going to take our last look at hero number 2, who is David, from 1 Samuel chapter 18. And in this chapter, we're going to see a good glimpse of how David handles his friendships and also how David handles his enemyships. David has a great friendship with the young Prince of Israel, Jonathan, but he has a terrible relationship with Jonathan's dad, King Saul. And we're going to see how David handles that. And we're also going to, in the process, kind of see a glimpse of what the rest of 1 Samuel is going to look like as David navigates this tricky relationship between Jonathan, his friend, and King Saul, his enemy. The first relationship we see is his friendship with Jonathan. Jonathan is the prince, Jonathan is the son of the king, and Jonathan understands that he himself is not going to be the next king as we would normally expect. So there ought to have been a great tension in that friendship, but Jonathan compensates for that by making a covenant with David. Now, a question you might ask is it necessary for me to have a covenant in my friendships? And the answer to that is yes, absolutely, if your dad is going insane and trying to kill your best friend. In that case, yes, you should have a written covenant and you should give gifts of clothing and stuff like Jonathan did to David to prove that, man, he is loyal to him. His friendship is stronger even than family bonds. And so Jonathan and David have this wonderful friendship. Later on in 1 Samuel, as David is on the run from King Saul, Jonathan, Saul's son, is going to come out to David and find him. And we read that Jonathan helps David find strength in God. Okay, now this is the basis for their friendship, is that it is a spiritual relationship in which they are both devoted to God. And so this friendship is wholesome, it is good, and it is one where they're helping each other draw closer to God in their own lives. It is the best kind of friendship that you could possibly have on this earth. So David and Jonathan have that going on. Jonathan's ultimately going to save David's life, but David, after the defeat of Goliath, is brought in closer to Saul, and Saul, has a definite benefit from having David as a leader in his army. But the problem is that people begin to notice that Saul isn't much of a leader anymore, Saul isn't much of a warrior anymore, and David is. And people do what people do, which is that they make things worse by this hit top 40 song about Saul slaying thousands and David tens of thousands. And it does not go over well with Saul at all, as you can imagine. And so Saul, in 1 Samuel 18, as he's going to do for the rest of 1 Samuel, attempts to kill David. In fact, twice he tries to throw a spear at him into the wall. Now, can you imagine how this is for David? Can you imagine David going to his mom and saying, "Hey, Mom, is it okay if I go over to Jonathan's house?" And his mom says, "Yeah, but be sure to be home by dinner time, and also be careful in case his dad gets mad and throws spears at you again." And this is a complicated, messy relationship, and Saul has it in his mind and in his heart that he's got to kill David. He's got to eliminate David. If he doesn't get rid of David, then David is ultimately going to take the throne from him. Now, of course, Saul doesn't realize that this has already been decided. It's already a done deal. David's already been anointed. It's just a matter of when before David becomes king. No matter what Saul does, God's plan isn't going to stop. But that doesn't make it any easier on David. And I want us to notice the focus that Saul has in this terrible enemyship and the focus that David has in this terrible enemyship. Saul's focus is on David. Got to kill David. Got to get rid of David. Got to do everything I can. David, David, David. He dreads David. He's afraid of David. Man, he's just shaking in his boots because of David. But look at David's focus. I mean, David is focused on getting out of the way of the spear when it comes hurling toward him, But other than that, his focus remains on serving the Lord, serving and honoring the king and his country, and doing the things that he's supposed to do. And you look at David versus Saul, and Saul is essentially going insane, whereas David, even when his life is on the line, has a peace about him because he hasn't become obsessed with Saul the way that Saul has become obsessed with him. Now, understand that all of us have friendships. I hope that we do. We need to work on having friendships. And our best friendships are the ones that are going to be like David and Jonathan, where there is a spiritual element to those friendships, where we remain loyal to one another, even through some very difficult circumstances. And ultimately, as Jonathan did for David, we help each other find strength in God. But also we need to realize that all of us are going to have enemies. All of us are going to have conflicts, people that we don't get along with, people that maybe are out to get us for one reason or another. And the question is this: am I going to become obsessed with revenge or retaliation, or what am I going to do to them to get them out of the way of me, or to get them back for what they did to me? Or am I going to say, you know what? Even though I have this unfortunate relationship, my focus needs to remain on serving the Lord and doing the right thing. We know we look 1,000 years or so into the future, and we see the Son of David, Jesus, our ultimate hero, having a distinct relationship with his friends and also a distinct approach toward enemies. Jesus has friends around him, basically the whole 3-year ministry that we get to see him up close. And those friends are people who are unlikely friends of the Messiah. They're fishermen and a tax collector and tradespeople and Galileans. But these 12 friends Jesus has around him, one of them ends up even being a traitor, but Jesus finds strength in them, and they grow from being in the presence of Jesus, obviously. But Jesus' approach to his enemies is one of the most amazing things that we could ever see about Jesus. In one sense, it's more amazing than the miracles that he did or the healings that he did, because Jesus had enemies. Man, did he have enemies. But Jesus had an approach to enemies that the world still can't believe. The idea is that instead of trying to get revenge against our enemies, instead of trying to do evil to our enemies, or even to give them what we think they deserve, Jesus' approach to enemies that he recommended and that he lived out was to love our enemies, to pray for our enemies, to bless our enemies, to do good to our enemies. We're told in the book of Romans, man, when we do this, it's like heaping burning coals on their head. But Jesus sincerely wanted good to happen to the people, man, who came against him. And we see it again most distinctly on the cross when Jesus turns to God as people are doing the most atrocious things to the most innocent person ever and says, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing." Man, take my enemies and allow them to have a clean slate. Allow them to have forgiveness, a new start. Man, is it possible that we could look to Jesus in how we approach our friendships, and also that we could look to Jesus in how we're supposed to treat our enemies in a way that says there's something different about us. Man, there's a love about us that's greater than all the hate in the world, and it's patterned after our hero, our superhero, Jesus. Keep reading with X-Ray Vision this week. See you soon.